is the TV Booth Podcast.
Hello again, and welcome to another episode of the TV Booth Podcast. I'm Rob Francis. Thank you for downloading. My guest today is one of the best-known voices in British television. With a career spanning over 30 years, she's worked with various television stations. But she'll be best known for her role at London Weekend Television, where alongside her colleague Glenn Thompson, she made the last announcement on the station's final day on air in 2002. My guest is the one, the only, Trish Bertram.
Hi, I'm Trish Bertram, and you're listening to the TV Booth Podcast.
Trish, it is a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for being a guest today.
Thank you for asking me, Rob.
It's an absolute delight to be talking to one of the best voices in British television by a mile.
That's a bit over the top.
I don't think so, and a lot of my followers have said the same thing. So let's start at the beginning. Did you always want to work in television?
No. Is that a bad thing to say? No, I started off, my first ambition, my absolute burning ambition was to work in theatre.
Oh, right.
Not necessarily as an actress. I got stage struck at the age of 16. And this whole very alluring circus world was the world I wanted to kind of run away and join. So theatre was my first big love, I have to say. So that was it really. So yes, I got stage struck at 16. I went to see a show back in. You can work out how old I am then. I'll just say back in the 70s, called Godspell, which starred a young unknown called David Essex, with another young unknown called Jeremy Irons, and various other unknowns who are now jolly famous today. I went to see this show because I'd seen a clip on the telly, and what blew me away was that I thought, goodness me, I didn't know theatre could be like this. I thought theatre was really stuffy and boring plays and drawing room comedies and for grown-up people. And so it kind of opened my eyes that theatre could be something different. And with this kind of revelation, I then got absolutely crazy generally about the state of theatre and British theatre, and started researching it and reading plays and going and seeing lots of different things. And I set my heart on a career in this world. So I applied for drama school to be a stage manager and technical person at the end of my A-levels, which upset my parents terribly because they wanted me to go to university and do something posh and proper and all these things. I got into the Central School of Speech and Drama, and I went on the stage management and technical theatre course. So that's kind of how I started. That spat me out the other end after a couple of years of doing that, and I started a career working backstage as an ASM stage manager in various places around London and down south. So that's kind of what started for me. So
Sounds good.
You're going to ask, how did it lead to television? I know it.
That's my next question, Trish.
Okay.
It's nice that we're on the same page here.
When I was at college, I shared a flat, along with a couple of other people, with a friend who, we all got together. You know, poor impoverished students tend to kind of get together and share flats. So there were four of us. And she, at the end of college, she went off and got a job touring around with the Cambridge Theatre Company. And she wrote me a letter, one of my course mates. This is relevant, by the way. Now, back in the day, there were no mobile phones or emails, so she wrote me a letter. And she wrote a letter saying, I've got this job. I've kind of accidentally fallen into this job down in the west of England. I've got this job at Westwood Television as a continuity announcer, sort of by accident, because they asked me. And I think you should have a go at this. And her name was Fern Britton, and she was my college flatmate. So she put the idea in my head.
Excellent. So was that your? Did you actually work for Westwood Television? Was that your first?
Fern did. No, Fern worked for Westwood Television.
Right.
Fern was on tour with a theatre company, and she took some actors into Westwood Television for an interview. And while she was there, somebody spotted her and went, "Oh, she'd be good on camera. You know, she's good on interview. She'd be good on camera." So she started as a Westwood Television announcer with Gus Honeybun and all those things. So she's the one who wrote to me and said, have you thought about doing this? Because when we were at college, everyone said you were the one with the unusual voice. So she put the idea in my head.
So,
you see how things start.
absolutely. So what was your first announcing job? Do you remember it?
Okay, my very first announcing job. There's another little bit in the middle here. When Fern gave me this great idea that maybe this is, I thought that's a great idea because I'm not an actress and I can't act to save my life. Maybe I could do something with this voice. So I made a homemade tape into a cassette recorder. I remember writing some links from a copy of the TV Times and sending them everywhere. You see, Rob, what it is, it's the confidence of our naivety. And when we're that naive, we believe we can do anything. And we lose that as we get older. So here's me in my 20s sending a homemade tape to lots of TV stations. Can you imagine it now? And they all wrote back and said, who do you think you are? And, they all wrote back. But in the meantime, I applied to go on a nationwide, it was like a forerunner of the X Factor. Back then, Esther Ransom was hosting a fantastic program called That's Life. And she did a nationwide trawl for new presenters. And I thought, oh, I'll have a go at that. So I applied for that as well. And I got down, much to my amazement, having never been in a TV studio in my life. Much to my amazement, I got down to the final selection. There were like 3 girls and there were about 10 boys, and we all ended up having to do a mock program at Lime Grove Studios. This is around the early 80s. And anyway, I was the runner-up for the one girl's position on the show, Joanna Munro. I didn't get the job, I was the runner-up. And Esther took me aside and she said this. She said, Trish, you've got this really unusual voice. You could do something with it. I thought, now, Rob, when people keep saying that to you, you start thinking, okay. So she said to me, you're not ready yet for something like this, but if you need to use my name, please use it. And I took her at her word. I wrote back to every TV station I've written to and said, look, Esther Ransom says I've got this really amazing voice. I think you should give me a second look. And I thought, if Esther Ransom... So, of course, what happened was some of them actually took a bit of notice, including London Weekend Television. And LWT got in touch and went, okay, seeing as you think you're so great, why don't you come in and have a chat with us then? And it was the Esther Ransom thing that kind of, got the doors open. So you never know what it is, really. You never know. So in I go to LWT to have a chat, terrified, because I've never walked into a TV studio in my life. I don't know where apart from the whole Lime Grove thing for That's Life, which was pretty scary. And I go in and I have a chat. And it turns out that all their announcers of the time lived out of town. So Peter Lewis was driving in from his country mansion in God knows where, Wiltshire, I think. They were all these grand announcers were driving in for the weekend. They didn't have anyone on their own patch, London Weekend Television. They didn't have anyone close by that they could call on in an emergency. And I happened to live in Waterloo in a flat at that time. And they said to me, look, if we train you up, we think you could be our emergency person. Would you be interested? And I said, yes, I think I would. And that's how I got in. It was proximity to the station got me in the door, literally, because I live 5 minutes down the road. So.
It's not far from Waterloo Station, is it? So,
exactly. So you see, you just don't know. I would say to anybody listening to me rambling on, if you've got any ambitions in any direction, just, keep at it, because you don't know what is the thing that's going to open the doors for you. In my case, I was lucky. I lived down the road, and B, I had the absolute cheek to write back and say, Esther Ransom says you should see me, So there you are. But that literally is because I was young and naive and probably very, 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 very silly. But, I look back now in awe and think, how did I have the faith to do that, the amazing confidence to do that? The answer is naivety. The answer is naivety.
Yeah.
I started at London Weekend Television. How lucky was I? Having been told by some of the smaller ones that the smaller one, Anglia, and I remember Anglia saying to me, I went up there to do an Envision audition, which I hated because I was rubbish in Vision. I was rubbish in Vision, everyone. I really was.
There's video evidence somewhere.
Oh, it's terrible. Smaller companies would say, you need to try a bigger company because we can't afford to train anybody. We're just a small company. You need to be ready formed if you come to us. And the bigger companies would say, Thames Television, I remember, would say, look, we're Thames Television and we're terribly important. And we're Granada Television, we're terribly important. We don't, you need to go away and do your time in the regions and learn your trade in a small company before we'll look at you. So it was this catch-22. So when LWT went, yeah, come and talk to us because you live just down the road and we think that might be useful. I went, yes.
So you've worked for various other ITV regions. Which ones have you worked for?
Well, it kind of spins off I'm sure fellow ITV announcers back in the network day would agree. It's because there was very much a lot of what is the word that will come to me in a minute? Cooperation is the word between the network companies. I read on Twitter sometimes and laugh that people think that all the companies didn't talk to each other and hated each other. Not so. They all communicated and cooperated. There were monthly massive meetings where the big execs would all get together. It had to operate in the spirit of cooperation in order for the network to work. So if you were an announcer in that system, all the other stations kind of clocked who was working for who, and particularly as they all met in London once a month, they'd all tune in and they saw the London announcers working. So that's kind of how it helped. If you work for one, other doors would listen. So I got to go to TVS. I approached TVS because I thought to myself, I'm not getting enough training here. I'm not getting enough airtime at LWT because they don't sling you on in Pres 1 straight away. They slung us onto a very small part of it, which was the bit we were putting the commercials into Channel 4. So I wasn't up there with Peter Lewis to start with, and I needed more experience. So I approached TVS, and TVS said, "Yeah, come on down here. We'll give you some shifts down here." And so I went to TVS, and I had a go at that, and I had a go at InVision, and I've got to say I loathed doing InVision. I really didn't like it at all. And I also did a little bit for. I did a bit for West Country, filling in purely because that was later on, only because an old boss of mine went to work for West Country, and he said, help, I'm having an announcer crisis, come and fill in for a bit. So I did a little stint down at West Country for a while, back in the later 80s, I think it was. Or was it the 90s? No, West Country was the 90s, wasn't it, after the franchise change? In the 90s.
You did some stuff for HTV as well.
Yeah, I used to do promos for HTV, very occasionally for Anglia, and back then, of course, nobody was all connected on Skype like we are now talking. You literally had to get on a train and go to the stations and sit down in a promo suite, in a sound suite, and do the work. And I loved that because it meant I had these lovely outings, nice outing to Cardiff and go and see everybody working there. I really liked a lot of the announcers who were freelance would tour around the network, just freelancing around the various companies who were, filling in as an announcer, filling in as promo voices. There was this great kind of moving workforce that serviced the network back then, before it all got connected.
So you worked for many ITV companies, but you've also worked for satellite companies. What was it like working for BSB, for example?
Well, I can't mention BSB, Rob, without its forerunner Super Channel, because Super Channel really was the very first. Super Channel and Sky Channel, as it was. We were the two first big satellite companies that launched in the 80s. So because BSB was kind of a follow-up from my Super Channel days. So I'll talk about Super Channel first because it was an amazing experience, and I'm very proud to have worked for both, actually. So I consider myself a satellite pioneer. Late 80s, Super Channel set up. Once again, my time at LWT, I was still very much the junior in the 80s, which is fair enough. I wasn't doing very many shifts for them. I needed more experience. I wanted a job where I literally was plugged into the system, if you like, and working shifts, more or less round the clock. And once I couldn't apply to the BBC because once you were tarnished with the ITV brush, the BBC wouldn't look at you. And Channel 4 weren't interested. It was literally the one thing I did find was that once you had cast your die, if you were known as an ITV person, it was very hard to cross over. You know, or if you were known as a BBC person, or if you were known, and Channel 4 obviously created their own sound, and this is in announcing terms. So I needed to go somewhere where I learnt more about what I was meant to be doing. And Super Channel launched, and I applied and did the audition, and they took me on. And it was extraordinary. It was an amazing time to work for Super Channel. We were based in the heart of London, back of Oxford Street. And mainly the workforce came from the BBC and a few of us from ITV. So the first thing that happened was there was kind of like a real... there was a communication problem, because the BBC people, presentation people, had their own language and we had our own language as old ITVers. And so you'd be in a corner going, what are they talking about? The symbol? Oh, you mean the ident? Oh, okay. You know? So there was a real language thing but in the end we all kind of like shook down and became Super Channel people. And Super Channel should have been a success, really. It was launched as the best of British television for Europe. It was owned by everybody except Thames. I think Thames very wisely didn't take shares, but they owned a bit of the Astra satellite, if I remember, if memory serves. So they very cleverly didn't actually back the actual channel, but they backed the satellite. And everybody else kind of co-owned it. And therefore our schedules were a real fantastic mix. And the BBC did a deal where they gave us a load of programming. So we had a mix of BBC and ITV programs, the best, you know, from the past and present. And we were meant to be this fabulous showcase for Europe of the best of British television. And guess what? Europe didn't give a toss. They didn't care. This amazing arrogance. I remember we were launched by Mrs. Thatcher and everything. Big launch party. Mrs. T rocks up, you know, says, "Here you are, Europe. We're all going to show you how marvellous we are." And there we all are thinking how marvellous we are, and they didn't give a toss. And that was the first big shock, was that nobody in Europe really cared about our wonderful British television satellite station. Which makes me laugh, because that, once again, it was arrogance, Rob. It was just absolute arrogance that we thought we were so great, I think. And secondly, Equity, the Actors Union, threw our launch into disarray by not agreeing the actors' residuals. And therefore, most of the programmes had to be pulled from the schedule. And we ended up showing an awful lot of wildlife, because tigers and lions don't need repeat fees. So there was that. That really screwed it. Now, your question about BSB. After 2 years at Super Channel, and it kind of went belly up, really. It got sold and passed along the line, and as every time it got sold off, for instance, Richard Branson bought it for £1 and promptly sacked half the workforce, so half of us got made redundant. And then it got sold on by him to an Italian media family called the Marcucci's, and they yanked it out of its home, and we ended up in a basement in Molinare. It got, you know, and then it ended up being bought by NBC, the Americans, and off it went to Docklands. But along the way, it kept shedding people all the time. And so I knocked back on the door of London Weekend and went, my satellite adventure's gone a bit sort of, I was about to say tits up. Am I allowed to say that?
Not a problem.
My satellite adventure's gone a bit bleep up. And they said, oh, come back then. But well done you for going away and getting a bit more experience. And then a year later, an old boss of mine who had been associated with Super Channel, there's the link, he'd been our deputy head of press, and he went, do you fancy having another go? And I went, what do you mean? He went, well, I've got myself into another one. It's called British Satellite Broadcasting this time. Do you fancy coming and having a go at that one? I went, yeah, why not? So he said, I need a senior announcer. He said, I need someone who knows what they're doing, because we're going to hire lots of people who've never done it before to give it a different sound. He said, but we needed a couple of people around who kind of know how it runs. He said, come and have a go. And I went, yeah, okay. So off I went again, because I was always keen to learn something new, and I was always up for a new adventure. So off I went to BSB, which was, as we know, another big disaster. So good fun.
Oh, good fun indeed. Good fun indeed. I'd like to talk to you about two events that I think may have shaped your continuity announcing career.
Okay.
The first one was August the 31st, 1997.
Yes, that's Princess Diana, I'd say.
Death of Princess Diana. Now, you were the on-duty announcer that day.
I was scary, very scary day.
What was it like on that day?
Okay, that was, yes, you're absolutely right. That for me is the probably the day I earned my money and all my experience came into play. And I think all my fellow announcers would say the same, that you are shaped by these days. I listened to Mark's actually, and Mark was talking about 9/11, and I thought, yes, he's absolutely right. We had a boss, Rob, who used to say, I don't pay you for what you say on air, I pay you for what you do when it goes wrong. And by that he meant, i.e., when events take over and things go not as expected. So Diana, the death of Diana, was one of those. I had done the late shift the night before, Friday night, and that meant I was home by 1 in the morning. I think, yeah, our shifts finished about 1, even though the telly sort of carried on through the night. And I'd been up to about 2, because when you come off a shift, you are always wide awake for about an hour by the time you get home. And so I got to bed very late. And in the morning, about 8 in the morning, I dimly heard my phone ringing. And my other half got up, answered the phone, and I could hear this kind of like murmuring of voices. And he came in and he said to me, you've got to get up and go to work. And I went, I did the late. Don't. I was on late. And he said, no, you've got to go to work. It's Lucy, your boss on the phone. Your boss is on the phone. Lucy's on the phone. So I get out of bed and I go to the phone and she says, Trish, you've got to come in. Princess Diana has died. And I went, oh. And I'd dimly been aware that there'd been some news footage the night before. There'd been a kind of like a news headlines thing, and I'd looked at it the night before, and it just said she'd been taken to hospital. I remember they said there'd been a crash in a tunnel in Paris, and she'd been taken to hospital. And I remember thinking, oh, she'll be okay. They're not reporting she's died or anything. She'll be okay. Because you have to be, as an announcer, very aware of news events, as I'm sure you realise, because it affects you. And I remember thinking that the night before, okay, she's gone to hospital, that's fine, I can go to bed now, it's all going to be fine. So my boss said, get in. So I get dressed and I stumble into work on very little sleep. Because we had hired that day, we had a freelance on duty for the early shifts, and it's not fair to actually ask a freelance person to handle something like that. You have to put on someone who represents the company, and I was staff at this point, so in I go. And our lovely freelancer, remember, it was David Bradford. Famous David Bradford, who a QVC legend, he was freelancing for us, and he became our gopher and our runner that day, and he was sterling work because we needed someone just to keep the cups of tea going. In we go, and literally, television is run by the split second. There is a schedule that absolutely maps out television presentation to the second, and you go in and you're about to tear up the schedule for the whole day. That is scary. Literally, from 1 hour to the next, we did not know what we were going to do. So all the control rooms are linked up by a red phone. So the red phone connects up. Everybody's speakers are up, so you can hear all the other inputs from all the other control rooms. So if you imagine, it's like a mass conference call of all the control rooms. Everybody is deciding what's going on. The big execs come in. The top execs decide hour by hour. So Granada, Carlton, London Weekend, they decide. So what was happening was things like, if I remember now, was it Anglia said, well, we're due to do a live, what was it they were due to do? We're due to do a live blah, 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 blah. We'll take that out and we'll turn it into how is this affecting you program. Somebody else said, well, we're due to do this, but what if we run that? ITN are on the line going, we've got the obit ready, maybe we ought to put that there. And they literally plan the schedule from hour to hour. So while they're doing that, the presentation managers are planning the junctions and going, okay, so we'll have 340 there, we'll have this there, this there, this there. And that's all filtering down over the red phone. So I'm sitting in the London Weekend control room with one of the promo guys. We're working out what our slots are from all the information coming in. So we're going to get 30 there, 30 there, 30 there. And I then am writing on the fly what I hope is suitable explanation as to why our schedules have gone out the window, the sad thing that's happened, and what is happening for our viewers. And so I don't know if I've explained that at all well, but all I remember is we flew by the seat of our pants that day, and we literally filled in hour by hour, junction by junction, and I wrote it as I went. And and hopefully sounded suitably somber, because it was sad and was shocking, and nobody quite knew what was going on that day. So yeah, it was the day we all earned our money. It really was. And that was the first time we were fed to the network, I think, London Weekend. Yeah, so I knew I was going out to the network, which is no big deal now, but back then it was. So
a day that no one will ever forget.
And no one will ever. I'm very, very sad. And I suppose our next big one, it'll be interesting to see, purely from an anorak presentation hat on, with my presentation anorak hat on. When dear Her Majesty goes, and for goodness, she's not immortal, we know that. It'll be interesting to see how that is handled as well. But
yes,
hopefully it'll be done with great somber planning, whereas poor Diana, took everyone by surprise, really, as we know.
I'd now like to talk to you about the let's move forward to 2002.
Yeah.
The end of London Weekend Television.
Very sad.
How did you find out the news that the LWT name was disappearing?
Yes, our boss Lucy. We had an immediate boss. There's several layers of management on. Television has two sides to television: production side, and then what they call broadcasting sides. So presentation, promotions, planning, compliance, legal, all of that comes under our side. So our immediate boss Lucy, our presentation manager, basically got in touch with Glenn and I. My TV husband, as I call him, wonderful Glenn Thompson, and said, I'd like to take you both out to lunch. And we went, uh-oh. Whenever your boss rings up all happy and cheerful and says, I'm going to take you both out to lunch, it's not going to be good. And of course, we'd heard rumblings, Rob. We'd seen the way things were going. The promo department had become the network promotions unit. So all the promo departments around the network had all been amalgamated into one. The control rooms were all being amalgamated. More and more of it was disappearing as the big companies swallowed each other up. So we kind of knew that maybe our day would come. So our boss took us out to lunch locally in Waterloo and sat us down and said, at the end of this year, and this was around, I think, maybe it was August or September, and she said, at the end of the year, this is going to, a bit later on, this is going to be happening and pretty soon, within weeks. And I'm just giving you a bit of warning. And there will be, we're going to, it's going to launch as ITV. There will be opportunities for you to apply if you wish to join the network team. But obviously this will be thrown open to all the announcers around the network, which is only fair and proper, which it is. And and if you don't choose to apply and you don't follow ITV into the future, then obviously we will be discussing redundancy packages with you, because you've both been here a long time now. And that's how we found out. We were taken out and told. So, and we were both very sad.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Because we loved LWT. I mean, LWT was just the best. The best experience ever. Really, it was just such a great company to work for.
But I have to admit, the final weekend of broadcasting as LWT was heaven for us presentation fans, especially the final day when you brought back all the old idents, and it even had a startup sequence.
I'm going to claim all credit for it now, because it was all my idea, and I just want that on record now.
Actually, whose idea was it?
It was mine. It was mine, because now what you've got to remember is, bit by bit by bit, various sort of managements were being let go or out the door. And we were a rudderless ship by the time it was approaching the start of ITV, because Granada had bought us, and the Granada management were really not sort of in force. The old LWT management were out the door. Our bosses were disappearing. There was only Lucy left, our immediate manager, keeping it all going. And I said to her, we can't just disappear off air without marking this. This station, this company is something extraordinary. We've been a pioneering company here. Can't we do something? And she said, well, it better not involve money, because they won't give us any money. And so I went to wonderful Gareth Randall. Hi, Gareth, if you're listening, who was one of our promo producers, who is part of the TV history community I know and highly thought of. And I said, Gareth, any chance? He said, leave it with me. And he went to Dave Jeffries, who was his mate, who who is fabulous graphics person and part of the TV history community, and he said to him, "So you could do us a favour," and so Gareth got together a little group of people and said, "Right, we will recreate all this." So I very much am grateful. And Lucy, our boss, was completely compliant and said, "Right, what do you need? What do you need?" And so between a little gaggle of us, we decided we were going to mark the demise of this station, all off our own bat, because there was no one senior to tell us not to. And Gareth came down with a video camera and shot that little thing, which lives on YouTube to this day. And yeah, so it was all slung together by the goodwill and grace of a handful of people who said, "Yes, I'll help you do that." And that's how these things are done. I think people always think that, these things are planned at high level in boardrooms. They're not. It's usually a handful of people at the coalface going, "Hey, why don't we do that? Why don't we do this?" And someone saying, "Yes, you can." And that was my immediate boss, Lucy Booth, who is thanked, I think, on the final placard says, "Thanks to Lucy Booth," because Lucy was the only presentation manager in charge at that point. Because as the companies wound down, nobody really cared about us. Everyone was getting ready for ITV. Get ready for ITV. Oh, do you remember that? That was back in the day.
Yeah.
So that's how it happened. And as I say, I'm totally taking credit, because it was my idea to sort of say, "Come on, everyone, I think we need to do this. And what can we do? And what's possible?" So I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of that.
Absolutely. So. We should also give a shout out to your continuity partner, Mr. Glenn Thompsett.
Ah, Glenn, my TV husband.
Yes, you of course shared the final continuity announcement with Glenn.
Yep, we did. It was pre-recorded, I must admit. You mean the Envision one?
Yes, the final Envision announcement. Yes.
Yeah, we pre-recorded that. I don't think I could have done any of that live. It would have just choked me up. Really, Glenn had the final day live on air.
Yeah,
quite right too. I couldn't have done it, and do you know what? I couldn't have done it. I could not have done it. And I know that my final announcement, which was a couple of weekends before, whenever I hear it, and I do listen to it sometimes. I know that sounds tragic, but I listen to it because I can hear in my voice how emotional I was. You have no idea what it took to say that announcement, because I was so upset, and it wasn't about losing our jobs, because we've all been battered by life by then. We'd all lost jobs and it was about the demise of this extraordinary company, and other people with their ITV companies around the network felt the same, because the network was something unique and something special. And I kind of think that we lost something special when that was all dismantled and it all became one big blobby thing.
Yeah. Over your career as a continuity announcer, you must have had a few bloopers and cock-ups. Anything interesting come to mind?
No, I'm trying to think. You've caught me on the hop now. I should have actually sat down and thought about this. I can't think of anything particularly bad or major in later times. But from the early days, when I started, London Weekend had a thing called Presentation 2. This was like a training press area. I'll take you back to 1982 and the launch of Channel 4. Now, Channel 4, this is all relevant. I know I'm a rambler. Channel 4, when it launched, the commercial breaks were basically sold by the ITV network. So Channel 4 launched, and ITV they kind of owned it back then, before it became a self-contained corporation. Or what is it classified as? Is it a corporation or a...
Yeah, it was a corporation, yeah.
Right, so it was the ITV network that propped it up. And in order to prop up Channel 4, they sold the commercial airtime and inserted it into Channel 4's output. So those commercial breaks, early commercial break years, were basically controlled, run, and placed by ITV. And London Weekend said, "Ooh, when we do the commercial breaks across the weekend, we could do it from a presentation suite, and maybe we could have an announcer that we could train up that would learn how to be an announcer as a kind of a backup for the main suite, because as part and parcel of the deal of putting in the commercial breaks, the ITV companies were allowed to have some little alternative viewing announcements, which they were allowed to stick into Channel 4's output. So the alternative viewing announcement would say something like, over on ITV now, you can see blah, 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 blah. Here on Channel 4, you can see this. So, can you imagine? Channel 4 were very pissed off about this because suddenly in the middle of their output, they'd get this random ITV person popping up with a voice that wasn't their regular announcer, suddenly plugging ITV, but acting like they were on the Channel 4 output, if that makes sense. So that's how I started. I would literally do 2 or 3 of those an hour, sitting watching our commercials go out from our control room at London Weekend within the output of Channel 4 across the weekend. And so as part of that, we had to occasionally fill the airtime because they couldn't sell all the airtime for Channel 4 in the early days. It was really hard work because Channel 4 launched and it was rather worthy and very esoteric and a little bit serious. I remember the press greeting its launch with Channel Snore and Channel Bore, and it was hard to sell its airtime back then. It was nothing like it is now, which is an amazing channel now. I love Channel 4. So the airtime would have great big chunks in it which had to be filled. And so we trainee announcers would write TV Times 30-second fillers. And you'd sit there going, go out and buy the TV Times this week, blah, blah, blah. And you'd write these fillers that filled up the breaks. And I had a fellow announcer who wrote clever tongue twisters. She wrote these really tricksy scripts. And I was really jealous and thought, oh, I can do that, I thought. I'll have a go at that. So one weekend, I had a 30-second slot to fill in a commercial break, and I wrote a tongue twister thinking I was jolly clever. And it came out like this. It was meant to be I've never forgotten this, because I had sleepless nights about it. It was meant to be 4 of Britain's biggest brewers give Britain's best-known pub a facelift. And it was an article about the Rovers' return in the TV Times. It came out as 4 of Britain's biggest brewers give Britain's best-known pub a facelift. And it came out completely wrong. And I'm live with this thing, and I'm looking through the window, and my transmission controller is looking at me in utter horror as this garbage comes out of my mouth. And I'm fortunate to say that was the early 80s. Yeah. I didn't get sacked for talking garbage on air. I've never forgotten it because I had sleepless nights after that, which taught me never be jealous of what someone else can do. Develop your own thing. It was a good lesson to learn.
Precisely.
Anyway, can't think of anything else, Rob, off the top of my head. Really can't. So.
Yeah, that's okay. No, that's okay. So let's talk about idents, because this is the whole point of this podcast, really, is talk about TV presentation. Did you have a favourite LWT ident?
Okay. I did love the River ident, and it wasn't on air for very long after I got promoted up to Pres 1, as I didn't get to talk over it for very long, sadly. You know, the bing, 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 da da da, you know, the famous River ident with the Harry Rabinowitz music. I do love that because I think it's iconic. And when I see it, even if it pops up randomly on TV, as it does occasionally on some retro program or whatever, the hairs on my arm still stand up and I look at it. We called them Solari and Genesis. They were the shutters.
Yes.
The white silver shutters that kind of did that dan 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 dan, you know, ding 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 ding, and they sort of did that weird shuttery noise. I like those because I thought at the time they were very modern. They looked very modern and a bit sci-fi-ish in a way. I loved them all. There was just one I hated. I think it's best to ask me the one I hated.
Which one did you hate?
It was one quite late in the day. There's a story for you. Okay, it was around the early 90s, I think. When did Granada come along and buy London, take over London? It was the early 90s, wasn't it?
96, I think it was.
No, I don't think it was that late. I thought they came along a bit earlier than that. Anyway, maybe, see, off the top of my head, I can't even think. It was around the time Granada had taken us over. And our senior management had all disappeared at the door again. I mean, senior management disappear very quickly in television, I have to tell you. They're there one day, gone the next. And once again, our Lucy Booth, fabulous press manager, was keeping the ship going. And we had this ident on air, which one of our last senior managers, broadcasting managers, had okayed. And it was this thing that just kind of went, boom. It was a circle that spun out at you.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of went, boom. And we all hated it. And we absolutely hated it. Right? Robin Paxton, his name, he got ousted in the Granada shake-up, and off he went. He went out the door, and I thought, ooh, perhaps we can get rid of this ident now. So I'm sitting in Pres one morning with my fellow transmission controller, Des. We're looking at this thing going vroom like that. And I said to Des, I absolutely hate this. I absolutely loathe this ident. And he went, yeah, I absolutely hate it. He said, it's criminal. And I said, who's to stop us getting rid of it? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, there's nobody in charge again, only Lucy. But our broadcasting management are out the door again, while we wait for the Granada newer management to arrive. And he said, well, there's no one to stop it, really. I said, dig out the one that used to go, which one was it?
I know the one you mean.
Play me some, Rob. Play me some. That one, right? It was the one with the stars. I said, dig out that one. So he goes into the automation, into the machine, and they faff around with the computerized machine by then, and he goes, oh, here it is, and he digs it out. And I said, let's put it in the next junction. And he went, we can't do that. And I said, no, because he was L&N by then, I think. Was he L&N? Was Des L&N by then? I said, look, I'll take the rap for it, if anyone asks. I'll take the rap. So I was terribly naughty, Rob. I was really subversive at work. So we stuck it in the junction. And we thought, oh, that looks better. Get the old ident back. And the phone went. And it was the internal phone. Only bosses know the number phone. Well, here we go. And it was a guy called Vincent OBryan ringing up from Sky Television. Vincent had been an LWTer, and we heard rumours that Vincent was coming back to be our new boss. And he rang up, and he went, hi, Trish. I went, hi, Vincent. I said, I heard a rumour you're coming back to be our new boss. And he went, yeah. He said, I'm just ringing up I want to know where you found that ident in the last junction. And I went, oh, it was kicking around the system. He said, why did you do that? And I went, because we hate the one that's on air now. And he went, good. He said, so do I. Keep the one you found. So we've binned this horrible thing, me and Des, my transmission controller. So Vincent came back and went, we're going to go with that old one. We're going to bin that one. So you see, you can get away with these things. And people think that decisions are made importantly at high level. They're not. They're made by people like me messing around in the control room, people. So I did kill the one I hated. I'm very proud of that as well. I killed the one I hated.
I'm very glad that one got killed.
But yes, people don't realise, you see, when managements change, stations are like rudderless ships, because there's you don't quite know how things are going to go and what's happening. And we had this weird period where our LWT bosses were out the door, Greg Dyke et al., and the new Granada top level management hadn't really installed themselves. It was a dodgy time. It was a weird time. So
it was, yeah.
Yeah.
Away from LWT idents, did you have any other favourite idents from ITV regions?
Always loved Thames, must say, because I'm a London girl.
Yeah.
And even before television, my theatre years, Thames and LWT really made you feel part of the whole capital thing. Yes, this is who we are, and these are our London stations.
Absolutely.
And I always rather liked the Anglian Night, because it was kind of big and proud and it's something a bit strange from up there in the country. I'm terrible. I'm so London centric. I apologise, people, for being so London centric, but this is where I've made my life the last 40 years. So
absolutely. So do you have any advice for anyone who wants to become a continuity announcer? I know we touched on it a little bit earlier, but do you have any other advice you'd like to give anyone?
Oh gosh, it's so different now, Rob. I'm very mindful that the landscape has changed. Having said that, there are some terrific announcers out there, and I hear people working who are very different to how people were back in my day, and I think they're absolutely top notch. There's some top notch people on air. What would my advice be? My advice, you see, it's now very much marketing led. I think television stations are very marketing led. And I think that if you want to approach a TV station, you need to be very aware of the ethos of that station and the branding of that station and what that station's image is and what it's trying to say. I say this to people who write to me. If you want to try and be a Channel 4 announcer, go away and make a demo tape that feels like a Channel 4 demo tape. If you want to work for ITV, go away and make a demo tape that feels like an ITV demo, because they're all subtly different. You know, the styles are different, the voices are different. And that's the first bit of advice, is get your ear around what that channel, what that station is trying to do on air, and see if you can make yourself fit into that. Back in my day, it was very much about, here I am, I'm an announcer, we're going to announce. And, these things weren't thought of quite as much back when I started. And the rise of that, and it has become important. I'm not dissing it at all. It is important, because look at how many channels are out there now. And look at the rise of Netflix and Amazon Prime and all the other choices we have. Therefore, branding and marketing and what a station is very important. And therefore, the announcer has to be part of that, has to fit that image and that style. So that's my advice, is really get your ear around what the stations are doing before you approach them.
Fantastic advice. Trish, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you for being a guest on the podcast.
Rob, you've been a delight. And can I just say to everybody who I ever talk to on Twitter, and I know you and I know each other from Twitter, I absolutely love the fact that you keep TV history alive. I love that. I love the fact that there's such a healthy interest in it. I do try and add my 10 pence with every so often if I think it's helpful and useful. And I think you're all brilliant. And I love the websites you all create and your podcast. I've listened to one or two, Rob. Really good idea. And thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Trish. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Rob.
Thank you to Trish Bertram for a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed chatting with her today. You can visit her website at trishbertram.com. And of course, you can follow her on social media at Trish Voice. If you haven't done so already, why not? Anyway, that's it from this edition of the podcast. Thanks for listening. Visit tvboothpodcast.co.uk for details of forthcoming shows. And we're also on social media on the usual channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Rob Francis. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.
The TV Booth podcast is hosted by Rob Francis. Copyright 2019.